It's very common for us to teach children something that they need to know or to give them instructions to accomplish a task. It's kind of what we do as parents. Especially with the latter, giving them something to do, it is not uncommon for them not to complete the described task and then to respond with one or more of the following. I'll give you just 3 examples as tastes. Quote, "Oh, I didn't know you meant for me to clean the whole kitchen, even though you said exactly that quite clearly. I thought you meant just to wipe off the counters." This is after a child decided to make a snack in a completely clean kitchen that somebody else had cleaned, pulling stuff out of the refrigerator, the cupboards, and on, and turning the place into a disaster area, and then they partially wipe off the counters. Obviously, you wanted the kitchen returned to its original pristine condition. Example 2. Quote, "Exactly 7:30?" Referring to when you clearly said you would be leaving the driveway for school at 7:30 if they wanted a ride, which happens to be 7:30 is actually a precise time. It's not a guesstimate. It doesn't mean about. And then the child continues, "Oh, I thought," so many excuses begin with that phrase. "I thought you meant that we'd, like gather in the kitchen at 7:30, or you'd call us at 7:30 and we'd get ready to leave." Third example, quote, "But you only said to mow the lawn. You didn't say I had to pick up the clumps of grass, those big clumps of grass that fall out of the mower when the lawn is wet and which then subsequently crush the underlying grass and kill it." And the child says, I didn't think you meant to rake up the clumps too," end quote. Have you heard these? I suggest a couple, if you haven't heard these, you haven't been listening. I suggest a couple of responses to the classic "but I thought" excuse that is used billions of times a day across the globe. But I thought. Teachers hear it every day. "Oh, but I thought it was due next week. Oh, but I thought that," yeah. The first response is what I call the story of the store owner and giving change. Now, back in the old days, people paid for things with cash, which in some places, unbelievably, you now can't do. And when you paid with cash, you often gave the store a certain number of dollars, and the clerk would give you back the coins or bills, the change, so that the cost of the item you purchased plus the change equals the money that you gave the clerk. I used to work in a fast food place when I was like 15, and man, we took orders right and left in our head from a long line of impatient people. There were no registers with pictures on them, and we totaled up their bill and told them how much it would be and added tax. And if an order came to $13.54, the customer would often give us a $20 bill, and we would give them $6.46 in change, or the difference between the purchase price and the money we were given. Now, let's suppose that every week I go to a certain store, and on each occasion the owner makes a mistake in the amount of change he gives me when I pay him, every time. I keep a written record of these mistakes, and after a year, I finally present my list to him. He claims with apparent sincerity that many of the prices on things are just printed too small, and sometimes they are, and sometimes he just can't see them clearly, so hence the incorrect change. He just makes mistakes. Now, how can I determine whether he's telling the truth about just making mistakes? Easy. In fact, perfectly, statistically accurately. If his mistakes are approximately half in my favor and half in his favor, then his explanation is believable. Either he has poor eyesight or he is incompetent at calculating change. If all the mistakes are in his favor, however, his vision is not the problem, nor his competence. Instead, he's been exposed as a thief and a liar. Use this metaphor with your kids. So picture this series of events. You give them an assignment. They do less than was assigned. They say some version of, "Well, but I thought," and then what happens? Well, regrettably, we tend to argue with what they thought, which is stupid. It doesn't work. We argue about what exact words we said and they said, and maybe you didn't say exactly whatever according to them, and it ends up being a hurricane of words that dilute and even eliminate the addressing the real problem and the message you're trying to teach. So next time you hear, "But I thought," you calmly say, and it's all about the tone, "No, that's not true." Now, they're going to look at you like, "Why do you know it's not true?" Of course it's true. I said it's true. So it must be true. Kids actually think like that. You say, "No, that's not true. You did not actually think I meant for you to do less as you did. You simply wanted it to be less. So then you used your brain, consciously or not, to support what you wanted." Now, they're going to be a little baffled by this language. Then you tell them the story of the store owner, and you say that it proves beyond all doubt that your child is not telling the truth. If they were, then half the time they would do more than you told them to do. And then ask them, "How often does that happen, that you do more than I tell you to do?" "Oh, I'll help you." Never, never do you do more. You've got them. You have to be calm as you do this. You can't be angry, or it's just you and your child having an argument like two kids fighting in the mud. "You're stupid. No, you're stupider." And it ends up with, "Well, your mama is so fat that..." You don't get into arguments with your children. Never argue with the child. It's love and teach. It's not argue. Point out to your child when they say, "I didn't understand," or "I thought you meant," invariably, like the story of the store owner, they have done less than was requested of them every time. Statistics don't lie. Their confusion never causes them to do more than they were asked. You'll never hear a child say, "Oh, you only wanted me to rake the leaves? I thought you wanted the whole yard cleaned up and the bushes pruned, and so after the raking, I mowed the lawn and pruned the bushes and picked up the sticks and took the leaves to the street. And while I was at it, I thought, well, I'll clean the house too." When was the last time a child ever said such a thing? It doesn't happen. So the child didn't forget. The child did what they wanted to do and then used the "oh, but I thought" excuse. Another example of doing too much. "Oh, I misunderstood. When you said to get my essay from school done by the due date next week, I thought you meant do it as soon as possible. I didn't know that you meant sometime this week, so I stayed up all night and finished it and did the rest of my homework too." These things are both so laughable because they never happen. They don't do more. It's always less. When somebody consistently uses the "I didn't understand" excuse to do less than they were asked, that's not a lack of understanding. It's lazy and selfish. And most of us as adults do this. We hear what we want to hear. Often we're not consciously aware of our deception, but we need to learn to recognize it in ourselves and to point it out when it's used by people we have a responsibility to teach, like our children. Children cannot be allowed to use excuses for their behaviors, because if they are allowed, they'll do it for the rest of their lives. They'll use excuses, justifications, what they call explanations, lies, and more. And as a result, they get fired, they fail classes, they lose relationships, and on and on. See how important these little moments are? You have to stop every one of them. Every time. Now, the second approach to the "but I thought" joke that children often tell. Here's the scenario. You explain a true principle, or you have a conversation where you hold them accountable for something they did not do that they'd been assigned. Their response, "Well, but I thought..." New approach. You can use them both. I wouldn't recommend using both in the same conversation. It will confuse them. You tell them, "What I just told you was quite clear, like the principle or the assignment that you gave them. I'm absolutely certain of what I told you. And now that you remember what you've heard from me in the past, because I can see in your face that you do remember that I told you, you realize that what I'm saying is true. It's like I've just told you that 2 plus 2 equals 4, and I've proven that it's 4, but you keep telling me, but I thought it was 5. And then you explain to me all the details leading up to your false belief that it's 5. Why in the world would I care why you thought 2 plus 2 equals 5? It doesn't matter. So all the blah, blah, blah in the world doesn't matter. It's 4. No more discussion about what you thought that was wrong matters at all. Adults are especially adept at describing why they thought something was not as it is, or how something would work when it doesn't. I had a man ask me to help him cut down a tree in his front yard that was dead and was about to fall on the power line in one direction or on his house in the other direction. There was only one place it could be dropped where it wasn't going to cause some significant damage. And I went to see it. It was 3 feet in diameter. That's a big tree. And he was going to just start cutting it, just start randomly cutting it with a chainsaw. And he was sure that he could avoid the power line in his house because he had a wire cable fastened to a large branch. And he was going to winch the tree with his truck in the right direction. Well, for one thing, he was going to pull the tree over onto his truck, but I didn't even get into that. I explained how that when he pulled with the winch and the rotten branch that he'd fastened it to snapped, the tree would actually spring the opposite direction and destroy the power lines. What did he say? But I thought, because he put the cable up there, it doesn't matter what he thought. Same with your kids. Doesn't matter what we think that doesn't work. No matter what he thought, he was either going to drop the tree on the power line or his house. With adults, we can ignore their excuses or faulty beliefs most of the time. I just continued and showed him how to cut the tree down, and it didn't hit anything bad. But with our children, we cannot ignore excuse making. It becomes a life pattern. We save our children's lives by helping them tell the truth about their mistakes and their justifications as we love them.